the top three economies. And how near or how far really are we from that mission, from that vision? So we thought it would be a great day to initiate this particular subject and a discussion on this. But first up, let's look at an AV on how near or how far really India is before we hear it directly from Mr. V. Anant Nageswaran, the Chief Economic Advisor of India, who will be joining us virtually, digitally, in just a few minutes. Thank you so much once again for joining us. Let's look at it. India in the top three, how near, how far?
India is one of the fastest growing major economies. Its ambition to become the world's top three hinges on sustained growth, structural reforms, and strategic policymaking. The Viksit Bharat vision aims to transform India into a developed nation by 2047, requiring robust infrastructure, digital innovation, and global competitiveness. The Finance Ministry, under the guidance of Chief Economic Advisor Dr. V. Anantha Nageswaran, has played a pivotal role in steering fiscal prudence, investment-friendly policies, and inflation management. His emphasis on macroeconomic stability, financial sector reforms, and sustainable growth aligns with India's long-term goals. With prudent economic strategies, private sector participation, and trade expansion, India's rise to the top three is imminent. The next decade will be decisive in determining how near or how far India truly is from this milestone.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a pleasure and a privilege to be able to speak to you and share my thoughts as part of the TV9's Economic Summit. We are just barely 2 days away from the end of the financial year 24-25. And as things stand, we do expect that the Indian economy will be on the cusp of achieving a $4 trillion size. And with the population roughly at around 145 crores, we are talking about an economy which is of the size of about $2,700 per capita. Just to give you a sense of the journey we have done so far, in 1993, we were a $300 billion economy. And today, 31 years later, we are more than 13 times the size that we were 3 decades earlier. Of course, there are other countries that may have achieved even greater growth, but then of course, India has also achieved it within the framework of debt sustainability, which some other countries may not necessarily have at this point. So there is much to be proud of what we have done. However, our journey is only half complete, because we are, as I said earlier, we are a country with a per capita of income of around $2,700 to $2,800. And to be able to reach even the middle income category, we need to achieve a per capita GDP of around $8,000 to $10,000, or by today's metric in the World Bank, it's somewhere around $11,000. That means we have to have a GDP size of between 12 and $15 trillion. And at the same time, the external environment has become more and more uncertain, volatile, and both geopolitical and geo-economic tensions have arisen. For example, in the first decade of the millennium, if you recall, 20 years earlier, many emerging market economies performed very well, and India was one of them. In fact, that was a time when the whole idea of BRICS came into existence, came into currency. And that was because the BRICS countries were considered the next frontier of growth, and India was expected to be next in line to achieving the kind of growth rates that China was able to achieve from 1980 onwards until about 2005. So we did grow at close to 9% per annum for about 5 years. In the wake of the global economic boom that happened in that period. But the unsustainability of that boom resulted in the global financial crisis of 2008, and then developed countries had to drop interest rates down to zero, but somehow the kind of growth rate that we saw in that decade did not materialize in the developed world, and therefore our ability to grow our exports at the same pace that we could achieve in the first decade of the millennium, we couldn't sustain that in the second decade. And now today we are in the third decade, almost already halfway through, and it looks like the external environment for trade in the world has become that much more hazardous. Because if you look at the global trade policy uncertainty index, it is at a 10 or 12-year high. There is a greater sense of uncertainty, and at the same time, growth prospects in developed countries have become progressively weaker, partly because of aging, demographic profile, and partly because of the debt burdens they carry. So in this context, India has to therefore double down on domestic levers of growth, which is exactly what the budget announced in July 2024 and February 2025, both these budgets do that. What are the key policy priorities for India to be able to become the world's third largest economy from where we are today as the fifth largest economy? I think these, first thing to realize is that these metrics or milestones are only markers of progress. Ultimately, what we are interested in is to be able to achieve a certain living standard that people in our country can legitimately aspire for and are entitled to. If you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer for 2025, released sometime in January or February, what is interesting is this huge chasm that has developed between developed and developing countries. The ordinary people surveyed in this Edelman Trust Barometer survey in developed countries seem to have a very low trust of various institutions, social and economic and governance institutions in their countries. In contrast, in developing economies, including in India, the level of trust in the institutions of governance, society and the economy is much higher. The second thing where India stands out along with Saudi Arabia and China is the confidence that people have about the future. In these countries, the optimism about the future is very high, that coming generations will have a higher standard of living than generations gone by. Whereas in developed countries, the perception is the opposite, that future generations will have it worse than the previous generations. This contrast itself is something that India should be able to build on. In other words, the confidence that the youth of India have about their future is much higher than the confidence that youth in developed countries have about their own future. And confidence is a self-reinforcing and self-fulfilling phenomena. And we need to do whatever we can to repose to justify the trust and faith they have reposed on the economy, on the governance, that we will be able to deliver a better future. And that's exactly what the budgets do. As I said earlier, the government is seized of this responsibility that the public have reposed on them. So, what are the key policy priorities that we have and what the government's budgets attempt to do? The key priorities, of course, for a country of our size, there are plenty of policy priorities that are important, but I just, in the interest of time, I'll focus on just 5 of them. One is, of course, to ensure that the youthful demographic profile of the country is adequately educated and skilled. Because ultimately, the strength of India is its youthful demographic profile, and a productive, healthy youth population will be the key driver of economic growth. We have come a long way in terms of enrollments. Today, almost all children in India are able to complete schooling up to year 12. And the enrollment ratio in tertiary education, even though it is still low, is far better than what it used to be 30 years ago. So we have to some extent put behind us the problem of enrollment. Now it is about education outcomes. The second is the issue of skilling, because employability is critical. It is not enough to graduate with a degree, but one should be employable. And even there, compared to where we were 20, 30 years ago, employability of Indian graduates has improved based on many surveys conducted by CII and other agencies. That is why if you look at the budgets of July 24 and February 2025, the emphasis on creating new AI centers of excellence, creating new higher number of medical college seats, and creating 5 centers for skilling with international collaboration, and then digital learning. All these, apart from the fact that the new education policy announced in 2020 provides for flexibility in curriculum and more learning choices for students, etc., all of these things constitute a viable policy package to ensure that education and skilling are done in a manner such that our youth are able to continue to contribute to GDP growth and benefit from it. The second priority is, of course, small and medium enterprises. Unless we have a viable small and medium enterprise sector, what in German language is called the Mittelstand, there is no manufacturing share of GDP prospect going higher. We need to ensure that SMEs constitute the backbone of the Indian economy, because that is what the development experience of other countries like Switzerland, Japan, Germany and the UK tell us. And that is why this government, ever since it came to office in 2014, has been consistently working to ensure availability of credit, skilling and training MSME entrepreneurs, providing credit guarantees, and also raising the thresholds for what constitutes MSME enterprises such that there is no fear of growth, and mandating that government enterprises, government ministries, etc., make sure that they pay MSME companies on time such that their working capital needs are met, and going to the extent of amending the tax law such that payments due to MSMEs can be counted as a tax deductible expenditure only when the payment is actually made, so that it incentivizes the large corporate buyers to pay their MSME suppliers on time. So various measures have been taken to ensure that MSMEs constitute a viable section of the economy. And the recent policy thrust with respect to MSMEs, apart from the financial side, is to ensure that the ease of doing business is specifically directed at micro, small and medium enterprises, removing the various obstacles and hurdles and barriers that raise their cost of doing business and reduce the bandwidth available to them to concentrate on their business development, which is now currently occupied in terms of compliance and inspection obligations. So that is the focus that the government is working on by with the announcement of a constitution of a high-level committee on regulatory reforms, which will follow very soon. Then the third priority is about boosting agricultural productivity. India has a large number of the population dependent on agriculture for livelihood. At the same time, India's agricultural yield is far below international averages, let alone best in class in the world. Therefore, agriculture is not an industry of the past, and as the economic survey says, it is an industry of the future, which means there is still room to extract additional 0.5 to 0.75% of growth for the economy from agriculture by boosting productivity, which means it's about ensuring that we have much more land covered by irrigation and that farmers are empowered both with respect to information and with respect to pricing and production choices, etc. So therefore, the announcement of the National Krishi Mission, Edible Oil Mission, and the development of climate resistant seeds, apart from the monthly cash payments that are being made to farmers, etc., the Kisan Samman. So I think the emphasis is on ensuring that agriculture is able to witness a green revolution 2.0, particularly in the context of the global warming that India will also experience. And that is my fourth aspect of my discussion, which is that the energy, climate change, global warming. India is in the forefront of G20 countries in terms of meeting or even exceeding its nationally determined contribution. The amount of addition we have been able to make towards renewable energy capacity is immense in the last several years. At the same time, we also understand that development has happened historically because of cheap energy, and therefore both energy security and energy affordability are very important for India's growth and development aspirations. Historically, developed countries have grown on the strength of two parameters. One is technology, the second is cheap and abundant energy. We should not forget that. And climate change is something that will be with us even if emissions mitigation do not happen from today onwards, because the stock of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere will ensure that the world continues to warm for the next 20-30 years. Therefore, we need to be very smart, specific, and be responsible about climate change. And therefore, we need to invest much more in adapting to climate change, in ensuring that we have a diversified pool of energy resources, not just coal or oil, or for that matter renewable energy, because they have their own technological challenges in terms of intermittency and lack of adequate storage options, etc. But we need to diversify into nuclear energy, we need to diversify into natural gas. So instead of talking about energy transition, India must talk about energy diversification. And only if we have a diversified and secure and affordable pool of energy options will we be able to ensure economic growth, which in turn generates the resources required for undertaking a low carbon pathway, low emission pathway to future growth. And that is again, if you look at the budget, the announcement of various customs duty exemptions for battery equipment, for pumped storage systems, the promise to open nuclear energy for private sector participation, the promise to amend the civil nuclear liability legislation, and the target of creating at least 5 small modular nuclear reactors by 2030. All of this, and India becoming part of the Global Critical Minerals Partnership, all of these things constitute a very wholesome and holistic package indicating acute policy awareness and responsibility towards ensuring that India has a greener future, and also a future that where energy is abundant and affordable for the population. The last policy priority and a focus area which will ensure India's growth is how do we absorb and assimilate the artificial intelligence advancement while keeping a very firm eye and focus on the need to generate jobs for India's youth. The Economic Survey in July 2024 wrote that we need to create at least 8 million jobs. And artificial intelligence therefore has to be harnessed in a manner that it does not come in the way of India generating adequate number of jobs in both services and manufacturing. So technology cannot be an end in itself. It has to be a means to an end, which is a better life for the public. And in a large country like India, where number of jobs that need to be created run into millions, the sense of responsibility is as large as the sense of possibilities that come with new technology. And that is something that the private sector has to keep in mind. So the government on its part, as I have just narrated to you in the last 10 minutes, has not only developed policy initiatives in all these key priorities, but also is focused on ensuring that it continues to empower the public, empower businesses through its focus on deregulation, such that economic activity and domestic levers of growth are fully harnessed in a global environment that is likely to become increasingly challenging. I think India is capable of rising to the occasion and be able to stand out as it already does with its high growth rates, with sustained economic growth and sustained improvement in living standards. Our track record over the last 30 years is testimony to the potential, the possibilities, and the capabilities that India has in ensuring a better life for the future. And that is what our citizens are expecting us to deliver, and that is the track record is what has given them the confidence that we will continue to do so, and the government is determined to ensure that their confidence is fully repaid in terms of actual delivery and performance with rising living standards. Thank you once again for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. I wish the rest of the day's proceedings all success. Thank you very much.